This is Dan Baer with California Survival School and survivallife.com. Stick around, we're going to teach you how to tackle survival priorities from a primitive perspective. So just scrambling around this area, these were stuff that were available for me to get stuff built. When I'm looking for materials to build a structure, the structure is secondary to the insulation. The whole reason I have a structure to this type of shelter is because it makes it more effective for us to get the insulation packed together and keep it close to our body. If I could just have a huge haystack here and climb in the middle of it, and that's what I had and it worked, I would just do that. So we want to minimize structure. We want to think of this as a sleeping bag, not a tent. I'm not going to be telling ghost stories in here, playing card games or whatever. I'm going to be sleeping and trying to stay warm. And so I need this to effectively keep the insulation as close to my body as possible. And so just like a body, I'm going to have a ridge pole, something that runs down the middle. I have 2 forked sticks here, some nice oak branches that seem to allow me to effectively wedge that over my bed. And I want to minimize height. I don't want a whole bunch of extra airspace in there that my body has to heat up. So I'm keeping this low, knee to mid-thigh height, so that I can just slide in there. And I want this ridge pole hugging pretty close to my chest. Just enough room to slide in over my bed. And so I'll even adjust this a little bit lower. All right, so that looks like it's gonna work. I'll make sure that my bed's kind of adjusted up in the right place. So when I slide into my door here, I need to make sure that my body is gonna be covered. I wanna make sure that my ridge pole from my head to my feet is gonna give me clearance to get past the supports, the last supports of my shelter. And so this seems like it's a good setup still. The ridge pole is hugging pretty close to my body. I don't have a lot of extra airspace in here that my body's gonna have to heat up, because your body is the heater, just like in your sleeping bag. So with this all set up like this and ready to go, I need to get the rest of the insulation on there. I want to, just like my body, this has a backbone right here, our ridge pole, and then we're going to have ribbing coming off the sides that we're going to pack the rest of the insulation on, just like your body with skin and everything else. So this is a good way to kind of remember it, but we want to keep this low and make sure that we're not going to have problems getting the insulation tucked up close to us. So with building a structure, with the idea in mind, to always keep in mind that all we're trying to do is effectively pack insulation close to us, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get ribbing that's going to minimize the amount of distance between myself and the insulation. I'm going to stack it on here nice and thin. With this grass, I hardly need any ribbing whatsoever. I can space it, a foot to 6 inches apart and still have it keep the grass where it needs to be. If I'm using leaves or other smaller stuff, the ribbing may need to be almost touching or just a couple inches, and we'll need a lot more of it. But luckily with this grass, it kind of bundles together and holds itself where it needs to be. So I'm just stacking some ribbing on here. I don't want branches with a ton of extra little side branches coming off, because if I have a big tangled mass of branches and stuff in the way of my insulation and I can't pack the insulation in there effectively, then I end up with just a bunch of air pockets that I have to spend more energy heating up. I'll need ribbing to go on both sides of my shelter. This is going to be completely enclosed, just like a sleeping bag. Any space in your shelter that's left open to the air, it's just like a sleeping bag. If you leave your sleeping bag halfway unzipped, not very effective. So I want to minimize the structure. A little bit more ribbing will be done. One thing about ribbing that's really important is oftentimes folks will stick that stuff up so it's coming up way up high. If your ribbing is sticking out of your insulation, it's going to be a channel for heat to escape and for water to come in. These things can be extremely, effective at keeping out the weather, even when it's raining pretty heavy. But if you're providing channels for the water to come in, that's bad news. So minimize the amount of height that these have and make sure your insulation is going to completely cover them. To make an effective shelter, I need to make sure that my walls are 2 foot thick all the way around. I don't want any spots where that's not happening. Right now, if I reach into my ridge pole, most areas I'm still only getting about a foot. So even though this may look well insulated at this point, if I want a really well insulated shelter, I need to keep going.